Hi. Before we begin the show this week, I want to send out a special thank you to my friend Paul out in Chicago because recently the camera that I shoot Acronym TV on, this 60D, broke. 4 years, just stopped working. I have no other camera except this webcam thing. And Paul, after I bitched on Facebook that my camera broke, shipped me a new camera. It's a Nikon D5100. Seems comparable to the 60D, even though the 60D's got a bigger, thing. Sometimes you don't need a bigger thing. So thanks, Paul. This works great. Welcome to the show. This week on Acronym TV, Obama has signed the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Also, we're going to take a look at lessons learned from the Iowa caucuses. Namely, we're in an existential crisis. But first, we're going to talk about Flint.
That my son had lead poisoning. The city and the MDEQ still continued to tell everyone the water was safe as the EPA sat by and watched in silence.
So this week, congressional hearings were convened on the Flint water crisis, and the two people that should be on the hot seat weren't even there. Governor Snyder wasn't there because Congress didn't even invite him. And the person who was the Flint emergency manager during the time of this incredibly disastrous and yet entirely foreseeable poisoning of Flint's entire population, emergency manager Darnell Early, he wasn't there because he didn't want to come. Early declined an invitation to testify before Congress because he said he was too busy in his new role as emergency manager of Detroit public schools, where his primary responsibility seems to be strong-arming teachers who have been staging wildcat strikes that are successfully shining a light on the horrific conditions that students are forced to undergo just to go to school in Detroit. Oh, and except here's one other important fact. Early didn't decline an invitation the way you or I might decline an invitation to a Downton Abbey tea party.
She was very upset by the death of poor Mr. Pamuk. Why? One can't go to pieces at the death of every foreigner. We'd all be in a state of collapse whenever we opened a newspaper.
Thank you, Dame Maggie. No, Early declined a subpoena to appear before Congress, flipping Congress the bird all the way from Detroit because that's how emergency managers roll. Now, I can hear some of you asking, Dennis, what the hell is an emergency manager? And I'm glad you asked. An emergency manager is what happens to democracy when someone runs for governor, say Rick Snyder, cozies up with the Koch brothers, gets elected on an austerity platform, and then introduces into legislation an ALEC-inspired bill in Michigan. It's called Public Act 4. And that act expanded the state's rights to take over cities and school districts that are facing hard times, thus neutering the elected officials previously in charge of said schools or cities and placing all of that power in the hands of a single person, appointed by the governor, the emergency manager. Thank you, Dame Maggie. Now get this. To save Flint money, Mr. Emergency Manager switched the source that Flint residents were to get their water away from Lake Huron. Lake Huron is fed by pure underground water springs, also happens to be the third largest body of fresh water in the world. So that was the source of water that was going to be that was previously fed to homes in Flint through the pipes to homes in Flint. Switched that water source to the Flint River, a body of water that had been the dumping ground for the toxic sewage and spill off from the General Motors plant in Flint, Michigan. The water from the Flint River that was fed to every single child and adult and person in between in Flint was so awful that it was corroding the cars, the brand new cars in the GM plant in Flint. Michael Moore, in his recent article, 10 Things They Won't Tell You About the Water Tragedy, but I will, summarized it this way, quote, while the children in Flint were given poisoned water to drink, General Motors was given a special hookup to the clean water. A few months after Governor Snyder removed Flint from the clean fresh water we had been drinking for decades, the brass from General Motors went to him and complained that the Flint River was causing their car parts to corrode when being washed on the assembly line. The governor was appalled to hear that GM property was being damaged, so he jumped through a number of hoops and he quietly spent $440,000 to hook GM back up to the Lake Huron water, sometimes called Detroit water, while keeping the rest of Flint on the Flint River water, which means that while the children in Flint were drinking lead-filled water, there was one and only one address in Flint that got clean water. That was the GM factory. Julie Laurie, a journalist over at Mother Jones, has been all over this story. She describes the transition to Flint River as going down this way. Quote, Flint was one of the first cities to be assigned an emergency manager. It was in 2011. It would have 4 emergency managers in as many years. In 2013, its city council voted to build a pipeline to Lake Huron that would free the city of its dependence on Detroit's water system by 2017. Ed Kurtz, the then emergency manager, signed off on the plan, and the question became where Flint would source its water in the intervening years. According to a recent Daily Beast investigation, Kurtz rejected the idea of using Flint River water based on conversations with Flint, Michigan's Department of Environmental Quality. Longtime Flint residents were also skeptical of the idea. General Motors, which calls Flint home, had used the river as a dumping ground for years. Yet, in 2014, under emergency manager Darnell Early, the city switched water resources to the Flint River. Now, Early says that there was a city council meeting approving this plan, but there is no record of any such vote by the city council. And emergency managers have, remember, under Michigan's Public Act number 4, the power to take over cities. And that's what this emergency manager had done. Taken over Flint, taken away democracy. And takeover is not hyperbole. Emergency managers have the power. Listen, city councils and city governments and mayors can still make some decisions. They can still pass budgets. They can still write laws. But the emergency manager has the power to oversee that. One person can nullify all the votes vested into the power of all the elected officials in a given city, town, or public school district. Democracy squelched. It gets worse. As awful as the Flint River is, it wouldn't have had the corrosive effect that it had if special additives were added to the water before they ran through the lead pipes that had already been piped into the homes in Flint, Michigan. You add this additive, this chemical additive to the water, and it stops, it binds the lead in the pipes so it doesn't seep into the water and get into the supply and get into the people's homes. You don't add this additive supply and those pipes corrode. They can't be fixed again. The water in your house looks like brown shit, and your kids get rashes, and some of them get lead poisoning with irreversible effects. How much would it have cost to not have this happen? How much would it have cost to put these at about $9,000? About $9,000 it would have cost to stop this. And now Flint, Michigan is looking at something like $1.5 million to replace all of those pipes. But in the interim, every single resident of Flint has been exposed, and a growing number of children have now reported being diagnosed with lead poisoning. According to the World Health Organization, quote, lead affects children's brain development, resulting in reduced intelligence quotient, it's IQ, behavioral changes such as shortening of attention span and increased antisocial behavior, and reduced educational attainment. Lead exposures also cause anemia, hypertension, renal impairment, immunotoxicity, and toxicity to reproductive organs. The neurological and behavioral effects of lead are believed to be irreversible. Heaping insult onto injury is that as of today, Flint residents are still getting billed for the poisonous water that's being piped into their homes. My name is Dennis Traynor Jr. You're watching Acronym TV. Stand for something.
Underwriting support for Acronym TV is provided by the following: Occupy.com, a news and media channel amplifying the voices of the global 99%. Find out more at Occupy.com. Mint Press News, independent journalism through the lens of social justice and human rights. Get the story behind the headline and how money and special interests are shaping a global class war at mintpressnews.com. Also, individual patrons like you. To learn more about giving opportunities, visit patreon.com/DennisTrainorJR.
Sex. Power. Farfignugan. Beer. Beer battered sex. Phallus. I'm gonna sell you a lifestyle that's gonna kill you and me and just about everyone we know. And I'm gonna do it just to make a buck. 'Cause full capitalism, kid. Boobs! Breasts. Impossibly round and gravity-defying baby feeders all up in your face, boys. You deserve whatever you want, because you're a man. Who's kidding who? You do want an erection lasting longer than 4 hours, but that's not going to happen, is it? So why don't you just stuff your face full of bag full of Doritos, wash it down with a 6-pack of Bud Light, and then get yourself a pickup truck. Ram tough, bud. Wise. Boobs, again. Breasts, again. Boobs and breasts drenched in high fructose corn syrup. Consume, conform, obey. Your car is inadequate. Your smell is offensive. Your house is too small. Beer, beer, beer. You live in the wrong neighborhood. Power. Do what I say, or you're going to be living in a van down by the river. Regress to the mean, people. It's comfortable here. A side note before we dive into what we learned from the Iowa caucuses. This presidential election, we are told by people again and again, people who have faith in this duopoly, is the most important election of our lifetime. So important that a supermajority of voters will convince themselves and then try to convince you, me, and just about everyone we know to vote for the lesser evil instead of standing up for the greater good. And with electoral politics, especially in the post-Citizens United era, ushering in tsunamis of money from sources foreign and domestic into super PACs, that even the FEC, the Federal Elections Commission, admits that they cannot police. And this is to say nothing of the second part of Citizens United, which cemented the idea, a century in the Supreme Court decisions in the making, that corporations are people. And we shouldn't be surprised that if corporations are going to be fucking people, then corporations are going to be fucking people. The poster boy, and I'm getting to the side note, I promise. The poster boy on the Republican side, at least when we shot out of the gates in this election cycle, the poster boy for this post-election cycle super PAC ready-made candidate was Jeb Bush, right? So what does being the son of one president and the brother of another president in this super PAC era get you? Please clap.
I will be a commander-in-chief that will have the back of the military. I won't trash talk. I won't be a divider-in-chief or an agitator-in-chief. I won't be out there blowharding, talking a big game without backing it up. I think the next president needs to be a lot quieter, but send a signal that we're prepared to act in the national security interests of this country, to get back in the business of creating a more peaceful world. Please clap.
Please clap. Reminds me of the time that I was in an off-Broadway play years and years ago, a really bad play, and there were only 3 people in the audience, and when the lights went out for the end of the play, there was no curtain call because the people fell asleep. Maybe I'm exaggerating. Maybe not. You decide. Back to Iowa. We know that Jeb Bush days are numbered, but what we do have is Donald Trump, who can play the media like a Juilliard prodigy can play the violin. Basically having no ground game in Iowa, coming in second place. And then we have, on the Democratic side, Bernie Sanders, who closed a 40% gap in the polls in recent months to come into a basic dead heat with Hillary Rodham Clinton, who has been running for president since she was a zygote. Hillary Rodham Clinton, who has a relationship with her massive super PAC that's not unlike the relationship that a fetus has to its umbilical cord. Hillary Rodham Clinton, the golden child of the DNC, the friend of Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the rigged, no one's going to run against her candidate. Sanders tied her. So you're left thinking perhaps big money isn't going to hijack this election. Cool. All right, Iowa, show me what democracy looks like.
We have 84. I'm going to do a coin toss. Bernie's side is called heads. I'm going to let the coin hit the floor, and if it's heads, Bernie will select. If it's tails, Hillary's side will get the extra delegate.
No one touch it.
Yes! Yeah!
Are you fucking kidding me, Iowa? That coin toss happened. That coin toss decided who was going to get the equivalent of one electoral vote in 6 different locations in Iowa. Now I say the equivalent of one electoral vote in Iowa because the Democrats in Iowa don't actually count the number of people who vote. You see, you go to Caucus and you stand in a big gymnasium with all your neighbors, maybe your boss, maybe your old lovers, and you go in the corner for Clinton, you go in the corner for O'Malley, and you go in the corner for Sanders, and then you talk back and forth from each other. There is no secret vote. And at the end of the night, there's no secret ballot. Those ballots aren't counted. We don't even know how many people voted in Iowa. So at the end of the night, in certain locations, they say there's 41 people on one side for Sanders, 41 people on the other side for Clinton. They've lobbied each other. No one's going to move. The rules in Iowa say that you flip a fucking coin. And 6 times this happened. In all 6 instances, the coin toss went to Clinton. Clinton won by that margin. Had the coin tosses gone to Sanders, the story going into New Hampshire, which Sanders is expected to win by a heavy margin, would be very, very different. So now the media narrative is that Hillary won Iowa by a hair. But the truth is that when these delegates get to the convention, that roughly the same amount of delegates will be split between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton. It's not a winner-take-all situation. Now, how many delegates will be given to Clinton and how many will be given, we won't know until June, because Iowa. I'm not suggesting that there is a conspiracy, at least not a coin-tossing conspiracy. I believe that Hillary Clinton's caucus goers, fair and square, won a coin toss in 6 different locations on the night of February 1st, 2016, in one of the whitest states in the country that shouldn't be having this much input over the national election. I believe that. But that's besides the point. What I am suggesting is that these electoral politics put us in a little bit of an existential crisis. Let me explain. For me, it brings to mind the play, later made into a film, called Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, in which, you remember, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, minor characters in the Shakespeare play Hamlet, are actually the major players, the main roles in the play Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead. They don't quite know if they're in a play. They don't quite know what their meaning in life is. It's a little bit of an existential comedy. And the play opens with coin tosses. 97 consecutive times, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern flipping coins for fun to pass the time. 97 consecutive times the coin lands on heads. And Guildenstern, being an Englishman, tries to puzzle it out using logic, using a syllogism. Here is what he said. If I remember from my monologue auditions from like 25 years ago. A syllogism. 1. Probability is a factor which operates within natural forces. 2. Probability is not operating as a factor. 3. We are now operating within unsub or supernatural forces. Discuss. Not too heatedly. The scientific approach to the examination of phenomena is a defense against the pure emotion of fear. Keep tight hold and continue while there's time. Now, a counter to the previous syllogism, it's a tricky one, follow me carefully, it may prove a comfort. If we postulate, and we just have, that within unsub or supernatural forces, the law of probability will not operate as a factor, then we must accept the fact that the probability is that within unsub or supernatural forces, the law of probability will not operate as a factor. We are not now held within unsub or supernatural forces after all, which is a great relief to me personally. Which is all very well, except we have been spinning coins together since I don't know when. And in all that time, if it is all that time, I don't suppose either one of us was more than a couple of pieces up or down. I hope this doesn't sound surprising, because its very unsurprisingness is something I'm trying to keep hold of. You see, the equanimity of your average tosser of coins depends upon a law or a chance, or let us say a probability, or at least a mathematically calculable chance that he will not upset himself by losing too much, nor upset his opponent by winning too often. This made for a kind of harmony and a kind of confidence. It related the fortuitous and the ordained into a reassuring union which we recognized as nature. The sun came up about as often as it went down in the long run, and a coin showed heads about as often as it showed tails. 97 coins, spun consecutively, have come down heads 97 consecutive times. And for the last 3 minutes on the wind of a windless day, I have heard the sound of drums and a flute. It must be indicative of something besides the redistribution of wealth. Scene! And for my next piece, I'll be doing Tyrannosaurus Rex from the movie Jurassic Park. Ah! So Obama got it done. The United States trade rep and 11 other trade reps from 11 Pacific Rim nations signed the Trans-Pacific Partnership in New Zealand. On Thursday, Obama is urging Congress to pass it as soon as possible. But as the old axiom goes, it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than it is to get anything done in Washington during an election year. So, for those of us who don't want to see the TPP enacted, there's some delay. But a word of caution. Remember NAFTA? TPP is NAFTA on steroids. NAFTA was our last disastrous trade deal. It couldn't get done by the person who was really pushing it, the U.S. President George Herbert Walker Bush. President Bill Clinton signed it into law. It's one of his first acts as President of the United States. That was pushed up to the 1-yard line, couldn't get done in the election year, then finished completely during the next term. Republicans, Democrats, it doesn't matter. And I know, I hear what you're saying, Bernie doesn't want the TPP, etc. But chill. Okay, so among those who would be president or could be president in 2016, you'd still have to lay some money, some decent money down on Hillary Clinton. Now, Hillary Clinton has been pulled to the left. So Madam Secretary of Wall Street has been pulled to the left by a socialist Jew named Bernie Sanders, and she once called the TPP the gold standard of trade deals. Now she's hedging her bets, and she's not so sure, and maybe she's not so crazy about it until she gets elected. Please. But we can't wait for that to protest against the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And in fact, in cities around the country, and in fact, around the world on February 4th, as we go to air, that very thing is happening. Protests are taking place all around the world on February 4th to mobilize, to raise awareness one more time, to dig our heels in the trenches and stop this trade deal from happening. So visit links that I'm going to put down here for more information on those protests and how you can loop yourself in. Big deal on February 4th, but that's going to continue all throughout, I think, the rest of Obama's presidential term. The ironic thing that is among the presidential candidates out there, Donald Trump is actually against the TPP. So who knows, perhaps go to a protest, you'll be chanting and getting arrested next to Donald Trump. Finally, as I said way back in June of 2013, there are 3 main things you need to know about the Trans-Pacific Partnership. It's big, it's long, it's complicated. Those aren't the 3 things you need to know. I'll tell you those in a minute. Except the one thing that I mentioned here in this little rant is that we're aiming to stop fast track. But everything else about this TPP is still the same, and we can still stop it by making Congress do what we ask them to do. That's their job, right? Anyway, here's how I put it. The 3 things you need to know about the Trans-Pacific Partnership way back in June of 2013.
When the Supreme Court ruled in Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission that corporations are persons entitled by the U.S. Constitution to buy elections and run our government, many of us who care about the principles of democracy, first and foremost among them that the people rule, felt as if we had been punched in the gut by Andre the Giant, kicked in the privates by the steel toe of a Gene Simmons boot, and Mike Tyson was making a meal out of our ear. It's hard to imagine feeling worse than that, but President Obama is working to see that you do. The Obama administration is brokering a secret global deal that combines all of the worst elements of NAFTA and Citizens United, shoots them up with steroids, sprinkles in a speedball, and codifies these principles into a trade agreement that is in fact much more than a trade agreement. The trade agreement is the Trojan horse, the roofie to bore you and put you to sleep. And when you wake up, a global corporate coup will have taken place, creating a parallel system of justice where 3 private attorneys would oversee a kangaroo court set up to defend corporate interests that the laws of all countries signing on to what is known as the Trans-Pacific Partnership would be subservient to. Now, the TPP is a lot of things. It emboldens the farming practices of corporations like Monsanto. It empowers big banks and Wall Street interests. It threatens the rights of working people. It will increase the cost of medicine, and it will end the free and open internet as we know it, among other things. But of all the things the TPP is, known and unknown, let's just focus on the three things you need to know now. Number one, it's a secret. While parts of the TPP draft have been leaked, the Obama administration is brokering this deal behind closed doors and aggressively pursuing an agreement that, if the text were in fact shared publicly, the deal would be impossible to sign because the opposition to it would be so great. But who has time to sit down and parse through 24 chapters of legal babble, bicker, and balderdash? That's what we have elected officials in Congress for, right? Yes, well, about that. As Lori Wallach and Ben Beachy wrote in a New York Times op-ed on June 2nd, while Congress has constitutional authority to set the terms of trade, so far the executive branch has managed to resist repeated requests by members of Congress to see the text of the draft agreement and has denied requests from members to attend negotiations as observers, reversing past practice. This is a Congress we're talking about. These are the gals and guys, by and large, who are total yes men for corporate interests. And if you can't find allies there for the TPP in that group of swine, then what exactly are you selling here? A few days ago, after navigating a labyrinth of red tape, Congressman Alan Grayson was allowed to read the text of the agreement in a private room, with no aides present, and under the conditions that no notes could be taken, no copies could be made, and the contents were classified as top secret. The second thing you need to know is that the TPP makes corporations more powerful than governments. Say that out loud and to yourself and let it sink in. The TPP makes corporations more powerful than governments. As Kevin Zeese points out, even though the public and the media cannot see the texts, and select members of Congress only get very limited access, 600 corporations have been advising the president and suggesting amendments that they have full access to the documents. This includes some of America's worst corporate citizens: Monsanto, Walmart, Bank of America, JP Morgan, Pfizer and Big Pharma, Cargill, ExxonMobil, Chevron are among them. In other words, corporate advisors to what Matt Taibbi famously called a great vampire squid wrapped around the face of humanity, relentlessly jamming its blood funnel into anything that smells like money, gets to read and craft the text, and you, me, and just about everyone we know, including our so-called representative officials, are locked out. The third thing you need to know about the TPP is the most important thing. We can stop it.
That's our show for this week. My name is Dennis Traynor Jr. You have been watching Acronym TV. What do you stand for?